Okay, so let's move on. Let's go on to the trim. Now there's 3 different types of trim. There's trim in general, there's L trim, and there's R trim. So let's go ahead and say string trimmed equals trim, and that is string here. Ooh, string. So why is this function useful? Well, what it will do first is it will trim the white space from the left and the right hand side of a string. So if we've got white space here and we've got white space here, this function will just return this itself. So let's go ahead and first of all echo out the string so we can see what we've got here. Let's go and refresh. Okay, so you can see that, oh no, that's because it's going to return like that, isn't it? Well, I'm not sure how to show you this as an example, but we could go ahead and echo string trimmed. So this is just basically going to return the trimmed string. I think if we go ahead and put in and MBSP in there, and we put that at the end as well, which is an HTML space, and let's echo out string. Okay, yeah, so now we've got a space at the start and the end of our string. Let's go ahead now and echo out string trimmed, and that should produce, oh no, because I'm using HTML data. Anyway, okay, so let me just explain this rather than demonstrate it. If we were to have a string like this, why might we have a string like this? Well, let's say you were feeding in values from a text file, for example, and you'd use, say, an explode function to get each value separated by a comma into a string. You may have white space on either side. Now this might affect if statements, because you might be comparing, let's say, if the certain value is equal to this that I've just highlighted in blue, when in actual fact it might equal this which I've highlighted in blue, so it might have white space either side. We can use this trim function to trim the white space from the left and the right, which will then just result in the string itself here. So that's the trim function. Alternatively, if you just wanted to trim the left hand side white space, you can use L trim, and vice versa, if you wanted to trim the right hand side white space, you can use R trim. So that is the R trim function, and the left and the standard trim, of course. Okay, so the last we're going to talk about is mainly for security purposes. Let's go ahead and say string is equal to this is a string. Maybe in here we could, yeah, well, we'll leave it as now. This is the add slashes function. So slashes equals add slashes, and we'll supply that with the string. So let's go ahead and echo out string slashes to see the result that we've got. Okay, nothing at the moment. Now let's go ahead and add in image source equals something, so image.jpg, for example. Now the first thing is when we test this, you'll see that it's added slashes before this and this double quotation mark. No, it hasn't. So okay, so okay. Let's go ahead and get rid of this and just put a slash in. So for that, you would use the HTML entities function if you wanted to remove the you know, the HTML code as a whole. So let's go back to that actually, and we'll use the HTML entities function in here, and let's go ahead and refresh. Okay, sorry. Sure that has an underscore somewhere there. No. Okay, so what have I done wrong here? HTML entities. There we go, that was my spelling. So you can see now that we've produced a string with this data here. So what we've done is we've used the add slashes to add slashes just in here. Let's go ahead and remove this add slashes function. and you can see that that's just produced it on its own. So why is this HTML entity, why is this add slashes function useful? Well, it's useful so we don't pass anything that we don't want to. For example, with SQL injection, which I do have another video on, so go ahead and watch that if you haven't already. And if you've used databases before, that will be useful. But add slashes is basically going to add our slashes to escape different characters for security purposes. So now what we can do is go ahead and say echo strip slashes, and there we go. So let's go ahead and get rid of that there, and you can see that we've got rid of them. So we've added slashes here and we've stripped slashes here. Let's just get rid of that again so you can see the difference there. So why would you want to strip slashes? Well, for example, data may be stored in a database if it was going to be produced onto a page for viewing, and you might want to strip the slashes, or add the slashes rather, so this isn't passed as HTML code. Now, why would you want to strip the slashes? If you were, say, putting this data back into a text box for people to edit, so you might have this in an input text box, you want to strip the slashes before you put it into a text box for people to edit, and then you want to obviously add slashes when it's going to be viewed as plain text on a page anywhere on your website. So if you ever find you need to get rid of these to allow, either for SQL query security, or just to display data on your page securely, then the add slashes is the function to use, and to remove this is strip slashes, which will then allow you to view the plain data. So that's a short collection of string functions in PHP. There are many more. You can go to the PHP manual at php.net, have a look through the string functions, but these are the ones that I tend to use. Apart from the string reverse, I tend to use on a regular basis when I'm coding. So yeah, they're the string functions in PHP. The semicolon on the end of my line there. Okay, so you can see that. String rev. Okay, let's go refresh. Oh no. Okay, again, yep, sorry, I've added that. So it's strrev. You can probably tell I don't use this function too often, but just for demonstration purposes, you can see that what it's done now is reverse the string. Now, I've just actually, while I've been doing this tutorial, thought of a good way that this might be used. Probably not recommended to, but let's say we uploaded a file, say called image.jpg. We could echo string reversed, and we could do the substring of this, and we could get the first, say, three letters, which would return our file type. However, if you think about it, this actually wouldn't work, because it could be JPEG or JPEG. So that's the string reverse function. Just thought I'd drop it into this video anyway. If you can find a use out of it, that's great. The only use I can think of it is for novelty use, but there we are. So the next function we're going to look at is slightly more useful. It is comparing two strings for similarity. Let's go ahead and get rid of everything here, and we can start from scratch. Okay, so we use this function slightly differently. Let's go ahead and create two strings, and we're going to calculate the percentage and similarity between two strings. Now, you can use this in a variety of functions. For example, two people's, well, I can give you an example. Plagiarism, for example. If you were checking for plagiarism between two different say essays written, you could use this similar text function, and it would return the percentage and similarity between each essay, for example. But obviously in this example we're just going to be dealing with simple strings, so I'm going to say string1 is equal to this is my essay. I'm going to be talking about PHP, for example. Let's go ahead and escape that character there. String2 might equal this is my essay, let's say someone was to slightly change an essay, I will be talking about the subject PHP. Now what we can actually do here is we can now use the string function to compare the percentage and similarity between these two strings. So let's go ahead and say similar underscore text. It's not required to put into a variable because we're going to be returning the result within the function in one of the arguments and then echoing that back out. So the three arguments we need to pass are string 1, string 2, and then we need a result variable here. So we've got this result here which we can then go and echo out. So we could say the similarity between is, and then we can append on result. Let's put that there. So the similarity between is, let's go ahead and refresh. You can see it's 78%. So for example, if this was a long essay and the similarity was 78%, there's obviously something wrong here. For example, if we were to completely change this string, my essay is about PHP. I'm going to be talking about everything to do with PHP. Let's just go ahead and escape that. Let's go ahead and refresh, and you can see that the percentage has dropped significantly. However, if this was a longer string, there would be more to compare, and if they were very different, you'd get something completely different. So, for example, my essay is about cats. I'll escape that. Be talking about cats and their colours. That'd be nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh, and you can see that the similarity drops still. So that's how you use this function, and I've given you an example of why it might be useful. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some more simpler functions. Let's go create our string here. That's going to be equal to, this is an example string. Okay, so the first one we're going to be talking about is the string length. So string length is equal to, and this function is called strlen with no underscore, and then you just feed in the string that you want. This is a really useful function because, for example, if you were validating a form and you wanted to check that the length wasn't any bigger than a specific amount, you could then just use this inside an if statement to check the string length. For example, if the name, the name of the user or the username wasn't meant to be any more than 25 characters, you could say something like, if string length is smaller than 25, then we can say, yep, that's absolutely fine. Otherwise we could produce an error, just for an example. So let's go ahead and echo out the string length just to give you an idea of what this returns. So it will return an integer value. This counts the characters, so we've got 26. That seems about right. That's including the full stop as well, so it's any text inside of here. Hello, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video tutorial for the new Boston. And today we're going to be talking about arrays inside PHP. Now, an array is a way to store data inside one variable, and it's basically a collection of data. So, for example, if I wanted to store a few numbers, I'm going to say 1, 5, 10, 20. Now, if I want to store these inside one place where I can access them, that would be, more useful than having to break them up somehow to use them individually. It also works well when you want to loop through and take elements of an array. So, if you don't quite understand what an array is, then follow the examples, listen as carefully as you can, watch as carefully as you can, and you'll start to grasp why they might be useful. Now, in PHP, I'm going to create an array by using a variable, and I'm going to do this by creating the variable standard and we're going to assign an array to it. So I've called this variable food. Now I'm going to use the array keyword. I'm going to put 2 brackets, and then obviously I'm going to end my line. Now the two the two rounded brackets are where you're going to put each element of your array in. Now, an element is, or a value of an array, is automatically assigned a key, and the keys start from 0 and then they go on and on and on. So if I was to create, first of all, food here, pasta, this is key 0 of our array. This is the data held at key 0, and the value of key 0 is pasta. Bear in mind we can put numbers in these as well, but we can't mix them, so they have to be all of one data type. So food equals array of pasta, pizza, salad, and I've just separated these with commas, and I have put them in single quotation marks. So now we have 3 elements to our array at key 0 here, key 1 and key 2. So if I want to access, say, pizza, I'm going to say echo food, and this time I'm using square brackets. This is accessing the key of the array inside here, the element of each array, and I want to say 1. Now 1 you'd think normally would be relative to this one, but obviously this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, so we're echoing out key 1 of the array food, and we know it's an array because we're using square brackets. So this will simply echo out pizza. So let's refresh, and you can see that's echoed out pizza. The same as if we change this to 0, that's going to echo out pasta, and if we change this to 2, that's going to echo out salad. Now there's a quick way to see, I mean that's basically arrays on their own. These are just normal arrays that we're storing data in. Now if I wanted to say see all elements of the array, I can use the print r here, the print r function, and all I do is put the name of the array in. Now this gives us it in a way that we can really understand how this is working. So if we refresh, you can now see a clear demonstration of how the array works and how each value is stored. So we start off with this array keyword, that's just there. Just out of demonstration, if you were to just echo out the array on its own, all you're displayed with is this array keyword. You're not given the elements of the array. You need to access them individually using these square brackets. But for now, if we're just using the print r food, this is just basically showing us each key of the array. So remember I said key 0, key 1 and key 2, and the value pasta is assigned to key 0, the value of pizza is assigned to key 1, and the value of salad is assigned to key 2. So we can see these and access them however many things we add on. So for example, I could add onto the end of this, let's just say vegetable, and I refresh, you can see that that's added a key of 3 with the value of vegetable. So this is just basically how arrays work. All you really need to know at this point is that you can store many different values inside one data type, and then they can be accessed individually. But later on we can look at things like associative arrays, which give us a bit more flexibility, and where we assign not keys, but we assign our own sort of keys in a specific type, if you like, that allow us to use associative arrays to their advantage, and also multi-dimensional arrays. But this is just basically arrays as a whole. Now I've just had a thought. You can actually assign values to arrays by this. So if I was to say food, now we've got 0, 1, 2, 3. If I wanted to assign a key at key 4, I want to assign something else. So I could say fruit. So I've assigned at key 4 the value fruit. Now obviously I could have just done this in here, but if you wanted to do this in, say, a loop or something like that, this would be the way to do it. Obviously later on in PHP you'll understand why this method is a lot more useful than this method here. So let's just go ahead and print our and then array of food, which is how we've stored it, and refresh, and you can see that at the end we've got key 4 here, and we've assigned the value of fruit, and we've done that in a completely different way, but individually it is useful in some circumstances. So that's basic arrays in PHP. Hello, this is Alex from phpacademy.org with another video for the new Boston. Now, in the last video we talked about arrays. In this video we're going to be looking at associative arrays. Now, associative arrays store data in the same way, but allow you to change the key from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many keys you have, to a name of your choice. So first of all, this is from the prior example. I'm just going to delete this. Now, as it stands, we've got an array set up with 4 different types of food in. So we've got pasta, pizza, salad and vegetable, which turns out to vegetables. So at the moment this is key 0, this is key 1, this is key 2 and this is key 3. Now I want to store some useful information about this. At the moment we've just stored like this. Okay, it's not very useful as it stands. Obviously if we want to list this food then it is useful. However, I want to add some elements to this array that could be used in, say, a specific in real life environment. Now what I want to do is I want to, rather than have this as the value, I want to assign a value to pasta of the amount of calories that you might find in it. The same with pizza, the same with salad, and then lastly the same with vegetables. So I want to assign a value, and to assign a value to this key, remember this isn't a value anymore, I'm going to say equals and then a greater than sign, and I'm going to add a certain amount of calories that this can be equal to. So pasta we might say 300 calories. Pizza we're going to say equals and greater than, might be 1,000 calories. Salad we might say is equal to, let's say, 50 calories. In fact, no, that's not really realistic, 150 calories. And then vegetables, I'll say are equal to 50. Now if you carefully watch, remember we're using our commas after this, we're assigning this all in one, and then it's separated by commas. If you watch carefully how this will change, and I'll tell you how this will change before it does. Now this 0 is going to change to pasta, and then this equals and greater than sign is going to tell us how many calories here, and the same with the pizza, salad and the vegetables. So if I refresh, you can now see that pasta is equal to 300, pizza is equal to 1,000, salad is equal to 150 and vegetables is equal to 50. So our key of pasta is holding a value of 300, our key of pizza is holding a value of 1,000, our key of salad is holding a value of 150, and our key of vegetables is holding a value of 50. So now what we can do is, instead of accessing, let's just comment this out. As before, we accessed array elements like this. We used 0, 1, 2. So if you imagine, this would be 0, this would be 1, this would be 2, this would be 3. Now if I was to try and access, say, element 0, that's pasta of 300 calories, when you refresh the page you can see nothing's happened. Now why has nothing happened? Because the key of 0 doesn't technically exist anymore, at least to our view. In actual fact, this has now become an associative array because we're associating pasta with the value of 300. So now if we echo out the food, the contents of pasta within this food array, we'll now retrieve the value 300. The same as if we were to echo out the calories in pizza, this will then equal 1,000. So you can see that we've now created an associative array. We're associating values to different different keys, and it's by association, so you can understand now why it's called an associative array. So this is a better way in PHP, especially when you deal with databases later on. These, if you've worked with databases before and you know what fields are, or column names are, sorry, you'll have the option to use an associative array when you've gained data from a database. So associative arrays are really good to use, especially when you don't want to remember, 0, 1, 2, 3, because that can be a bit annoying. But yeah, that's basically associative arrays in PHP. This is Alex from phpacademy.org with another tutorial for the new Boston. Now in this tutorial we're going to be looking at multi-dimensional arrays. Now multi-dimensional arrays really put into use or into practice the use of arrays. Now as it stands, we've created this array at the moment. We have an associative array with different food types here, and we've assigned values of the amount of calories in each food. So we've given an example of how an associative array can be useful. Now we're going to move on to something slightly more complicated, which is multi-dimensional arrays. It sounds more complicated than it is, but in actual fact the basic concept of this is an array inside an array. And this can be multi-dimensional, so it can be a two-dimensional array, a three-dimensional array, and so on and so forth. And you need to really think about this as categories. Now in this example I'm going to be creating two categories. I'm going to be creating a category called healthy and unhealthy, and then inside these different categories I'm going to be adding different types of food. So I'm going to class pizza as pizza as unhealthy, and I'm going to be classing salad, vegetables and pasta as healthy food. So this is basically a multi-dimensional array because we're going to have an element, two elements, healthy and unhealthy, and then we're going to have more arrays, and pizza is going to be within an array in itself, and salad, vegetable and pasta is going to be in an array. In fact, we'll add another unhealthy, I'll say ice cream. Okay, so this is what we want to achieve. So let's modify underneath here. We'll comment this out just so it's not going to be taken as code. Okay, so we've commented that out. This is essentially what we want. Okay, so this is the top array. So let's delete everything we've got inside. The first thing we're going to do is create two elements to our array. The first one is healthy, the second one is unhealthy. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're creating essentially an associative array, because I want to add a value to this and a value to this, like we did in the associative arrays tutorial. But now, instead of assigning a value, you may think, oh yeah, I'm going to start to assign salad as healthy, and then blah blah blah. It's going to get all mixed up. So what we do is we take it into another dimension and we say we're assigning the value. So we have created an array inside an array, so we're already talking into a second dimension. So if I add another array in here, let's just run this to prove that it's going to work. Okay, yes, we're not receiving any errors at all. Now inside these arrays we can start to add our foods. So let's add salad, vegetables and pasta, and then in unhealthy let's add pizza and ice cream. Okay, so now we've essentially created a multi-dimensional array. What we can do is we can bring this down to make it sort of look a bit better. So pull this down to here. It's a bit tricky with this text editor that I'm using, but you get the general idea of how we can make it, you know, look a bit more easy to read, if you like. So let's get rid of this here just so we look a bit neater. Okay, so let's run this to make sure everything's working. Yep, we've not received any errors. So now how are we going to access each element of this array? So what we've essentially done is we've created an associative array with the value of the associative healthy and unhealthy as an array. So we've created a multi-dimensional array. So how are we going to access these different elements? Well, we can echo out food. Again, remember we're using our square brackets, and then we address healthy. But then what we do is we need to access either element or either key 0, 1 or 2. So how do we do this? You know, we need to add something around here to be able to access that. All we do is we put another pair of square brackets next to it, and then we type the element. So as this stands, we're accessing the array food, the key of healthy here, and then inside that the first key, which is salad. So we're essentially here echoing out salad. Now you can already see how this is starting to pull together into a database type structure. So let's just refresh and see if that works. We're echoing salad. Now we can change this to say perhaps 2. That's going to echo out pasta, and let's refresh. Pasta. Okay, so we can obviously change this to unhealthy and access element 1, which would be ice cream. So you can see how we can do this and change it, and you can see now how it's got multiple dimensions to this array. So that is basically a multi-dimensional array in PHP. How we declare it, and also how we access each element. Hello, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video for the new Boston. In this video we're going to be talking about the for each construct. Now it's commonly referred to as a for each loop because it does actually loop through elements of an array and allows us to sort of iterate over an array and take out different elements. Now I'm left with the example here of when I did the code from the multi-dimensional arrays tutorial, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be displaying to the user a list of healthy and unhealthy food, so we can sort of see the practical uses of multi-dimensional arrays, and then using this for each construct to basically display all these values rather than accessing the values like so. We could do food healthy and then access element 0, which would be salad. So if we refresh that, we have salad up here. So we start by just writing for each, and we have some rounded brackets, and then we have a block. So it's as simple as that. That's the syntax for it. Now inside here we need to address the array, so that would be food, and then we need to say as, so food as element. Okay, so food as element is taking our element, which in actual fact is healthy and unhealthy. Now, because I also need to take into account these here, I'm saying food as element equals greater than food. Oh, sorry, I'll just do it. Item, for example. Okay, so food is the array overall, element is healthy and unhealthy, and item is this array here. So food element is this, is this here and this here, and then the item is each one of these. So in fact I'll call it inner element, just so it's easier to recognize. Now I'm going to echo element, and then I'm going to append a line break on the end of that, so using the dot, and then I'm echoing out some HTML. So now we need to refresh to see what's going to happen now, and you can see that we're presented with healthy and unhealthy. So already we've categorized the two different elements of this array inside here. Now what we want to do is we want to further access our inner elements. So at the moment, if I was to come down here and echo inner element, spell it right, you can see that we're not going to have much luck, because all we're trying to do is echo out an array. So let's just refresh that. You can see under each one we're already starting to pull together some kind of structure where we're going to list our healthy and unhealthy food. However, we're just being displayed with this array keyword. So you'll probably remember that we need to loop again to find information about these. So we've already looped to find information about these. However, what we can now do is we'll scrap this line here, and we can say for each and create a new for each. So now what we can do is we can say for each inner element, which should really be called inner array. So let me just change this because it makes a lot more sense. It's harder than you think naming variables. So so we've echoed out each element of this, so this healthy and this unhealthy. Now we need to go in and echo out each one of these, so salad, vegetables and pasta. So now what we can do is say inner array as item is equal to salad, vegetables and pasta for this element here, and for unhealthy it's equal to pizza and ice cream. So now all we really need to do is say echo item, append a line break on, and we're done. Okay, so now when we refresh, you can see that it's taken each element of that and it's put it into a list, if you like. So what I'm going to do is make a simple change here, and I'm going to append a strong tag on the start of there and a strong tag ending there. That just sort of separates our tables by making them more bold. So now what I can do is I can update this as much as I want. So I could say popcorn and refresh, and it just adds an element, adds a value just straight into there. So now you can see, using this for each, we've been able to take the inner array of this associative array. Overall it would be called a multi-dimensional array, and we've just echoed out the data that we need to. Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and this is a video for the New Boston. Now, in this short series, I'm going to be or this short tutorial, I'm going to be talking about the include and require inside PHP. Now, you may visit websites and think, you know, how do they get the design or the template exactly the same for every page? And the answer is that there's a preset template. Not necessarily including using include or require. It will be using, most likely, but it will be using some kind of way to include this. Now you'll note that I've got two files open. I've got my index.php and I've got header.inc.php. Now header.inc.php has a header 1 with my page. So if we preview this in our browser, it looks like this. Now what happens if I want to create multiple pages with the same header in? Now let's just go and create another file, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to save this here in include require, and I'm going to call this let's just say another page.php. Okay, so I've got all in all three pages. I've got index.php, another page.php, and header.inc.php. Now we're going to later on in the tutorial discuss using PHP inside this file, but for now I'm going to say this is my template. Now if I want to write, let's say, echo, I'm just going to create a variable here called string, and I want to echo my variable. Okay, so on the index page this is basically going to echo string, and on here I want to echo var and echo var. So on my index page I'm echoing string, on my another page I'm echoing 10. Now what happens if I want to include the same header for both of these files? I want to have this my page header on both of these files. I can use either the include or the require function. Now for this purpose I'm going to be using include, and I'll tell you why just later. So we do include, and we create sort of like two either semicolons, either two single quotation marks or double quotation marks. You can also wrap this in brackets, but I just tend to prefer to use this method. And I'm just going to simply say header.inc.php. If it was a directory before, I'd do that. If it was in another folder, I would do that. So wherever your file is, in this case it's in the same location as these two pages, in the same directory. So now what I've done is, if I go back to index page, I've actually included this file in the top of my my page just by using this keyword include and including the file. I can do that in another page as well. So include header.inc.php, and you can start to already see how useful this is, because now when I go over to another page.php, the header is exactly the same. Now the reason we do this in general when we're creating a website, let's just say it's no longer called my page anymore, it's called Alex's page. Now beforehand I would have had to go to index.php, change the header, let's just say the header was up here, I would have had to change this, then I would have had to go over to another page and change the header there. But I've only had to change it once, and therefore because we've included it, it's updated on index.php and it's also updated on another page.php. So we've created what's called a template system where we've included our header. We can also include like a footer and then a main body if you wanted, or a menu. It's limitless. You can use as many includes as you want on one page. Now we may want to create a page where we store variables. Now let's just get rid of this, and let's just get rid of this. Now I want to echo out var1 on this page and var2 on this page. Okay, I'm not actually going to set var1 on this page or var2 on this page. I'm actually going to set it inside the header. So I open up my PHP tags in here and I type var1 equals string and var2 equals 10. You'll notice how the colors are changing. This just because of the nature of my text editor, but this is valid PHP code. So now I've declared these up here. Let's just comment these out for now, and you can see what happens when we refresh another page. Nothing's displayed, and when we come back to index.php, nothing's displayed. Now let's uncomment these and refresh. You can see string on that one, and you can see on another page we have 10, so we're back to original. However, we've declared these variables, we've assigned values to these variables in our header page, which we've then included. Now let's say we want to only run the rest of this page if this file exists. We want to check if this file exists. We want to kill the page if we can't find this header file, because if we're echoing out variable 1 on this page and variable 2 on this page, without this header file it's useless because we haven't declared our variables. So for this we simply use require rather than include, and you'll not notice any change to it whatsoever. Let's just refresh. It does exactly the same thing, and if we go back to index.php, it does exactly the same thing. However, let's change this back to include, and change this back to include, and let's say we specify a file here that doesn't exist, so none or doesn't exist.php, and let's just copy and paste this into here. So doesn't exist.php doesn't exist. Okay, so if we refresh we get an error. Okay, whereas here we're echoing out a variable, and we can display this by saying var2 is something, and then here we can say var1 is that. So if we refresh, we're still echoing out var1 is, but we're missing the variable because this page doesn't exist. However, if we were to choose require, okay, and we refresh, watch what happens to this. it disappears because we've retrieved a fatal error. And the fundamental difference between require and include is that require just handles the errors differently. So if we can't find the file and we've required it, it kills the rest of the page. We just kill the page off. So nothing else after this line here is executed. It kills it off. Therefore, the reason this is important is because if we needed variables, and we need this variable in this case to display this whole sentence properly, we require header.inc.php, and on here we require header.inc.php. Now, because we've required it, and it does exist, everything works out fine. So it's just a way with the require to ensure that you might be including a core file that has a list of variables that you need to use without your program. And because require and include are useful in the fact that you can include a long file with lots of variables that you need to use on maybe lots of different pages, require ensures that this file does exist, therefore the files are required. Include is more for design based choices. So for example, you might want to include a menu. Your website doesn't necessarily have to run with a menu. You don't want to kill the rest of the page if you maybe don't have the menu file available. So you just need to make a logical choice whether you use include or require, but for now that's both them inside PHP.
Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a PHP video tutorial for the New Boston. Now, we've already looked at include and require, but what about require once? Now, require once looks like this. It works exactly the same way as require and include on their own. You can also use include once as well. Now, but why would you want to use this? I mean, presumably if I was to say require my header.inc.php file, which I've got up here, which just has some HTML data in, and I was to go and refresh the page, you can see that it just says Alex's page. So we've included this, we've required this header in. There's not really any difference in output when we do require once. It's exactly the same thing. It produces exactly the same result. But there's one difference. If you use require once throughout your page, it will check to see if this file has previously been required, and if so, won't require it. So let's have a go at now requiring, and just requiring, not requiring once, header.inc.php in here. So let's press F5. Now you can see that it's required, or included if you like, the file twice. Now bear in mind that throughout this whole process we can use the include once as well as the include. So require once header.inc.php and require header.inc.php. So now what this has done is it's required header.inc.php once, but then it's required it again without using the once. So let's try and swap these around and see what result we get out. Okay, so you can see that what's happened is we've already required, or included if you like, the header.inc.php. So now what this statement will do, if you like, it will check to see if the header.inc.php has already been included, and it will include it if it hasn't been included, and if not, then it won't. And require once is similar to doing something like this. If defined, and then you choose header.inc.php within this function or this language construct. If defined, then require header.inc.php. So what I've just written here is exactly the same as the require once. So if we refresh now, we can see that we don't have another version of it required in here. However, if I was to swap them around again, so vice versa to what I already did a moment ago and swap them back around, and I click refresh, you see, oh no, that two aren't included. So this would now be if not defined. When we refresh, you can see that two of them come up. So forget this for now, that was just an example, but when we use the require once, we just ensure that the same file isn't required twice. Now, why might we want to do this? Bear in mind the whole time you can use the include once. There's just different ways to handle the errors. Include will include the file. If it doesn't exist, it will continue with the rest of the page content. Require will stop the page. So include and require once, why might we want to require them? Use them, sorry. So if we've got a large, say, core file where we're keeping variables, different functions, connecting to our database, just things like that, and we then go to require the file twice, we're significantly slowing down the execution of the page. And the reason for this is requiring something twice or including something twice without using this underscore once means that it will actually require it twice. So you'll be processing an include page more than once. So that's the main reason that you would use it. Some people have said that the require and include once language constructs will actually slow down a page anyway. However, nowadays with processing time, it won't actually make much difference. So you're much better off using this include underscore once or require underscore once to save the speed of your page for later on, just in case you do happen to include or require something more than once. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video tutorial for the new Boston. Now in this video I'm going to be briefly explaining and demonstrating the preg match function. Now the preg match function looks like this, and what it is it takes expression matching and lets us do this. So what is expression matching? Well, it's basically matching patterns inside of a string. So we could say we could use this function to check if a string exists inside of a string, but we can also take on more complex patterns and check for these inside of strings. So I'm not going to be demonstrating some of the more complex patterns because with the amount of different expressions that you can use to check for patterns, we would literally be here for hours because there's lots and lots of different ways you can check. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating an example of just checking for a string inside of a string. So let's go ahead and create our string data. And this is going to be equal to this is a string. Now what we want to do is we want to check to see if we find a match inside of this string. Now what the preg match function will not do is tell you where the match is. It will just show you, it will just return a 1 or a 0 depending on if there's a match. So what we can do is we can put this into an if statement, and the condition will either return 1 or 0, which is going to be the function itself. Therefore, if it equals 1, then we have found a match. If it equals 0, then we haven't found a match. So let's go ahead and create our if statement, and let's also create our else as well. So we've created an if else statement. Now what we want to do is inside the condition area we want to give the function, so preg match and then brackets. So in here we're going to take two parameters. The function itself takes 3 parameters, I think, but we're just going to be giving it 2. So essentially what we're going to be doing is searching for a string inside of this string up here that we've predefined. So let's say we chose the word is. We want to see if there's an is in here. We could also do it with simply something like, is there any spaces in this string? So we'll go for both examples and we'll demonstrate this twice. So the first parameter is the expression, the pattern that you want to match for, and the second parameter is the string itself, so the string data. And this can either be supplied in using a variable, or you can add your plain text in here. Plain text in here. Okay, so we're going to be feeding in string, that's there, and we're going to be searching for a particular word. So the simplest way that you could possibly do this is 2 forward slashes, and then in the middle of these 2 forward slashes is the word that you're searching for. So this is just basically meaning as this is. So we're searching for is inside this string. That's essentially what we're doing with these 2 forward slashes here, containing this is. So if this returns 1, that's going to mean that it is found, which at the moment we know that it is going to be. So in here we can echo out match found. And in else, what we can do is echo out no match found if we can't find a match. So let's go ahead and open up our browser and test this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refresh the page and see what we get up. So it now says match found. We knew that it would do that because we know that the word is contained within a string, or within this string. So now let's just simply put a space to see if it will return match found. Okay, so it's saying match found. So what we could do is we could have a function that would check, for example, for a space in a program, or sorry, in a string. And we'll do that a bit later when I've explained a bit more about this function. Now what happens if we don't know what this string is? We might want to search for a specific pattern inside of a string, and when we don't know how the string is formed or what we're feeding in, so we're just double checking something. And we're basically using pattern matching to ensure that it adheres to a certain standard. So we can use preg match for this. It's a very, very, very powerful function. And like I said, I'm not going to go through how we're going to check for patterns. If you go over to the php.net manual, you'll find plenty of information on how to match specific things, whether it be URLs, so we could take out a host name from a URL. We're basically looking for patterns within strings and doing things with that. And there's a variety of ways you can do this, returned as an array, etc., etc. So just for now, that's basically the preg match function. Let's go ahead and make this a bit more interesting. We're going to feed in a string to a function and check if it's got spaces. So let's go ahead and create our function. And if you haven't already looked at functions, don't worry, follow along the example anyway, and if you want to go back and look at functions and how they work, feel free to do so and come back to the tutorial if you don't understand what's going on. So we're going to create a function called has space. And what we're going to do is we're going to return true if the specific string has a space, and we're going to return false if it doesn't. So we're going to feed in the string as an argument up here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say if, and we're going to use the preg match function again to see if we have, like we defined before, a space inside a specific string. Now the string comes from the argument that we've just fed in. So if this does match, then we can return a value of true. So we can return true here. Otherwise, we can return false. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to call this function down here, but we want to call it inside an if statement, because we've got our function, but as far as it goes at the moment when we refresh, we don't have anything because we haven't called it. So let's create an if statement and say if has space, and let's feed in some text. So this doesn't have a space. If this has space, echo has a space. Else has no spaces. Okay, so, or has at least one space. Now let's take this string out, because I've just thought it would be better defined inside a variable here, and then we can just feed this variable in through there. So let's recap of what we've done. We've created a string here called this doesn't have a space, or with a value this doesn't have a space, with absolutely no spaces in it. And then we're calling our function here and feeding in this argument, which is essentially equal to this string here. And now it's been processed here. We're checking on the preg match, which we've already looked at in the first part of the tutorial. And then if this function returns true, which it will if it does have a space, then we're going to say have at least one space, or has at least one space. Otherwise we're going to return false, and we're going to say it has no spaces. So let's double check and see if this works. Okay, so it says now has no spaces because this string doesn't in fact have any spaces. Let's just create one space in it and see what happens. Okay, so it now says has at least one space. Now if we just create all the spaces in it we need, let's just put a single quotation mark there, and remember to escape single quotation marks when you're using single quotation marks outside of your string data. Let's refresh and it still says has at least one space. So that's a brief overview, if you like, of the preg match function, and we've created our own little application here to check if a string data has a space or not. But do feel free to go and look up the preg match pattern checking, and it's very, very, very in depth, but once you do get your head around it, you'll be able to look at it and realize actually how useful it is for checking patterns within strings.
Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and in this tutorial for the New Boston I'm going to be talking about string length and why it's useful and how we can do it. Now, as you know, we can create a variable with a string type which will automatically be created with us. So let's do that now. I'm going to create string, and then I'm going to call this or set this to the value of Alex. So we've got 4 characters in here. Now what we might want to do is we might want to find out how many characters are in this string. So we can go ahead and we can create a new variable, and I'm going to call this string length, and that is going to be equal to we need to call a function now to be able to grab the length of this string. So I'm going to say strlen, so short for string length, and then inside here we're going to take one parameter or one argument, and this is going to be the variable of the string that we want to count. So we want to count the specific amount of characters inside a string here. So I could in fact just supply this with an amount of characters. So I could say how many characters does this have? Okay, so now what we can do is down here we can echo out string underscore length. Now let's just preview that in our browser and see what happens. So you can see we've been returned with the result 35. Now that in fact means that there are 35 characters in this string, obviously not including the single quotation marks on the outside. So let's just test this out, something we can monitor. Let's just type the character A. Now let's come and refresh, and you can see that says 1. So let's look at how we can probably calculate a predefined string. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop the variable name in there, and that will transfer this data here into here. So now we should have the result 4. Okay, so we've determined how to count a string length and then how to output the string length, but why would we want to do this? Now, there are a few different reasons why we would use this strlen function. Now the first main reason would be obviously to count the amount of characters, but we might want to loop through, using loops in PHP, loop through each character. And the way we do this is we either use, I would personally use a for loop, but you could use a while loop, a do while loop, or a for loop. So let's say we were using a for loop to loop through. Now maybe I won't show you the example in this case because you may not have looked at for loops yet. However, to loop through a certain amount of characters, we would need to first loop through the first character, then the second character, then the third character, and then the last character. Now, how would we know when to end this loop? How would we know when we'd reach the end of a certain amount of characters? Well, the answer is absolutely simple. We would start at 1 and we would end at the string length, because in actual fact that if we were looping, we'd loop once, twice, 3 times and 4 times, and we'd end to loop through each character of this. Now let me just actually start up an example, because this is going to allow you to see it a lot better. So I'm going to say for, and I'm going to create a variable with the
value 1. So if you haven't looked at for loops yet, go and have a look at that and you'll understand what's going on here. So for x equals 1, we're going to say while x is smaller than or equal to something. Now something here is going to be the length of the string, and after this we need to say x plus plus. We're incrementing each time. So the string length here needs to be determined. So now what we can just do is put string length straight into there. Now what happens when we echo our x? Let's just keep an eye on what happens. We can append a break to this as well. So let's go and refresh. You can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 4. That's because we're already echoing that out there, so we can get rid of that. Okay, so we're echoing 1, 2, 3 and 4. So you can see that already we're counting through and we're only looping 4 times because we've determined that the string length is there. So this example might not particularly make sense to you now, but later on when you need to loop through a string or well, yeah, a string, if you want to loop through a string, you'd find this useful because you can determine a string length and then set a boundary for how many times you want to loop specifically.